I'm John Buchanan. Now, if you watch this channel with any regularity, you will know that I like sounds that move, that evolve, that change, that aren't predictable, that go from one place to another, all that good stuff. And what we're going to do is we're going to find an interesting way of making that happen with some effects treatments for one of the parts within this track. Let's just have a listen to it and then we'll shine a light on the part that I want to focus on. Okay, 8 bars of wonder. It feels a little bit like I've kind of been ignoring you EDM guys recently. You know, I'm here for you. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this track right here. So this is just an Apple loop, actually, as it goes, but I've done a couple of things to it. The full version of this sound sounds like this. It's got this kind of high-end thing, which I quite like, but what I've done is to put an autofilter on this track, so that effectively what we're doing is getting rid of some of that, but much more importantly, I'm using both the envelope shaping, which is effectively detecting the transients within the sound and then making those affect the cutoff frequency, at the same time as also setting up a little gentle LFO, which is just providing 2-bar movement, so effectively the sound gets brighter and duller, just over 2 bars. Not loads of that, but it starts to introduce some of the movement that I like. It's all about movement. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit of that, and that sounds like this. And that's nice. But what I've also done is just to slightly gate this signal as well. And what that's going to do is just slightly chop it up. So in other words, rather than every single sort of individual transient leading neatly to the next one, we're just going to introduce a little bit of silence, just literally just gating it. And again, I've deliberately set that at exactly a point where most of the loop isn't gated at all. And then just when everything gets a little bit smaller, we just introduce those little holes in it. And again, that just makes it a little bit less predictable. However, really what this video is about thinking about ways of making effects move rather than just individual synth parts. So the first thing I'm going to do is to set up a first auxiliary bus. There are none of these yet on this mix. And what I'm going to do is to set this to unity gain, which I can do just by hitting Option or holding down Option and then pressing the send level. And then what I'm going to do is to come to the reverb options and come and find Space Designer. Now what I want is something a bit sort of plate-like, I guess. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to just come into maybe medium spaces. Let's come and find a plate, maybe even something percussive and drum-like would be good. Let's see what that sounds like. No, that's horrible. Okay, so this is a bit more synthy, so let's go with that, this little soft plate effect. Now, when I talk about getting sounds moving or effects moving, what I really mean is, can we make them dynamic so that they're just in some way changing, somehow matching the kind of energy of the sound that's triggering them, but just to provide a kind of unexpected sonic layer. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to firstly create a track for this auxiliary. Now, I can do this within the mixer, but also I can control click here on the Space Designer track and literally just create track. And what that's going to do is to put that auxiliary track into my main page. And what I'm then going to do is to create just a 1-bar region, an empty 1-bar region for this plate. So effectively now what I've got is a region. Now, of course, that's not going to play any notes because this is an effect rather than an instrument. But what, of course, it allows me to do is to think about making a little automation curve. So what I'm going to do is to press A, And what I'm going to do is to switch from the regular track automation that we most regularly use, I'm going to come to region automation instead. And what I'm interested to do is to effectively just create a line right at the end of this region and one right at the beginning, which is just going to provide this ramp. And effectively what that means is that I've got a region which is going to produce a volume change to the soft plate. So this is the volume of this particular track. Now it stands to reason that because this is a region, if I was to copy this region, it will of course take the automation data with it. And what I could do in fact is just to repeat it, which gets me there a little bit faster. So what does that sound like? Well, effectively it's just going to produce this up ramp to the volume of that particular effect. And that's really nice. Now, there are a couple of things I like the overall shape of this reverb, but what I am going to do is just to slightly EQ it. Just to make it this slightly brighter, more sparkly thing by just EQing out some of the low end. And because that EQ is after the Space Designer, therefore it's just EQing the reverb, but not the original sound. Okay, I like this idea. I'm going to go further. What I want to do next is set up another auxiliary, and this time we're going to use a different type of effect. Really, I should label that first one. I'm going to just do that now because standards and all that. So this is our Plate Reverb, and this one is going to be a delay. There we are. Okay, what I'm going to do this time is to, again, just come and find track or auxiliary number 2. Just click on it here and it will appear on the right-hand side. And I'm going to add a tape delay from the delay folder. And this time I want something a little bit dotted, a little bit sort of syncopated, I guess. So I'm going to come for an 8th note dotted pattern. I'm going to add a little bit more feedback than the default. And because this is on an auxiliary, what we can do is to turn up the wet level to 100% because we only need this channel to provide the delay and none of the original signal. So that I think is going to work nicely. Okay, so let's have a listen to just a sort of flat delay amount. Again, remember, turn up the send in order to hear it. And that's really nice. We get loads more movement. Okay, well, one thing I could do, I suppose, would be to come to the channel for the tape delay. Again, I'm going to create a track for it from here, and that's going to add that to the mix. Let's put it underneath the first one because this is auxiliary number 2. And I could very easily just grab all of this information and I could copy it down to the track below. And what we then get would be exactly the same effect. Particularly if I copy it into the right space. There we are. Now you might be thinking, well, hang on, no, it hasn't copied it. Where is it? Well, remember by default, what's happening here is that we're looking at track automation, not region automation. So the moment I click this button, we will see that they're identical. And that sounds like this. And that's nice, except that we kind of very quickly assume that the reverb and the delay are the same effect because they're following exactly the same pathway. So it might be more interesting to create a pattern for the delay that is independent of the reverb or maybe plays off against it in some way. Now, really what I want to do is to have a delay pattern whose automation plays maybe over 2 or 4 bars rather than just 1. So I guess what I could do would be to reprogram a longer region and then copy that. But I could do something else as well. I'm going to come to the mix menu and I'm going to come to convert automation. And what I'm going to do is to select the visible region automation and I'm going to turn it into track automation. And what's happened now is that we're back in track automation mode. So effectively what I can do is to say, right, I've now got an opportunity to think about this as track automation, something that's going to evolve over a much longer period of time rather than being restricted to the region lengths. And it should be pretty simple for me to raise the level here up to 0 dB right at the beginning, and then to just double click to remove a couple of points. And by doing that, what I get a chance to do is to create a ramp, which is effectively going to start with lots of delay, which gets quieter, and then which fades back in again. Now, I could just go through and knock out all of the other points as well that are kind of in the way, and it won't take me very long to do that. But of course, one of the advantages of this system is that I can create changes that aren't quite as predictable as every bar on or off. So in other words, in this last version of this, we could maybe stick around here a little bit longer, we could drop to halfway through that bar, and then maybe we could even have a level that exceeds the send level that we're using elsewhere before it just drops back at the end to the final point. In other words, I can make that line as dynamic as I want to. And that sounds like this. We should get delay, which fades out and then comes back in, and then it does its little variation at the end. Nice, isn't it? So suddenly we've got all of this movement, and of course we can make these lines as complicated as we want to. And it feels like we could go even further, maybe having created a pattern that's broadly a bar long and another pattern that's mostly 2 bars long. What might it be like if we created an effect that was changing over an 8-bar sequence or something completely different? Okay, well, let's set up one more auxiliary. And this time we'll come and find something massive. I'm going to come back into the Reverb folder, come back into Space Designer, and this time I'm going to come and find a large space. And again, maybe we'll come into plates because they sound so lovely on electronic music like this. I'm going to select the longest algorithm there is. This is the Shimmering plate. Let's turn up its level. Now, at any given time, if I don't want to hear the 2 reverbs or 2 effects that I've already set up, I can just turn off their send level and then the sound won't be sent to them anymore. So this should now just be a static reverb treatment for this long shimmering plate. Let's just solo the synth triggering it. It's long and it's shimmery. Okay, now what I want to do, again, to introduce movement here, is to think about maybe a second way of treating this sound so that it evolves in some way. So I'm thinking about the sorts of effects that might be like a phaser, for instance, which just is going to produce some undulation, or a flanger would do the same thing. But if we automate an effect, which is going to alter the tone of the Space Designer treatment in some way, then of course, again, we've got the potential to have that just evolve in totally unpredictable ways all the way through the sequence. And the effect that I've got in mind is actually to use the Ringshifter, which is in the modulation folder. And this is going to allow me to sort of produce sort of ring modulation. Now, because again, this effect is being inserted after the reverb, it's only the reverb that is going to be ring shifted, not the original synth. So what does that sound like? Well, let's just have a bit of a play. So if I turn this more or less to the middle, we're not going to hear any modulation. And what I can do is to move in either direction just to introduce different types of ring modulation offsets. Sort of do that all day. Okay, so what I'm going to do once again is to repeat our trick of creating a track. This is going to be our shimmering plate. Fine, it's labeled it for me, which is great, but I am going to keep these in order. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to automate this in real time. In other words, I'm going to use latch mode to do that. But I'm just thinking that maybe quite a fun thing to do might be to double the length of the track, so that we could almost use this as a kind of drop section. So the effect that I've got in mind, I think I'm going to just use in this next collection of 8 bars before maybe everything comes back in at the end. And by copying, Logic is going to ask me whether or not I want to paste the automation data, which I do. So I'm going to copy it to this new location. So effectively it's just being taken along with us. That's just going to continue for those other 2 parameters. So effectively what I want to do is a couple of things here. I'm going to draw the changes that I want with the Ringshifter first, and then we're going to go back and work out exactly when we want to hear this using volume. So it's going to be a pretty constant effect to start with. Okay, let's go into latch mode and just draw in those changes to the frequency. Okay, nice little industrial moment to end. Okay, well that felt pretty good in terms of the overall shape, but there's way too much of it. So the first thing to say is I don't want this to happen at all for the first 8 bars. So I'm going to open up the automation, and this time we are going to create an 8-bar region, which is just going to sit here. And then what I'm going to do is to come back to my mix menu, come to create track automation, and I'm going to create 2 automation points at the region borders. What that's going to do is to give me 2 separate points at either end of this region, which means that when I drop this middle level, we just get this kind of absolute switch off, which is great. So it's going to be off all the way through here, which means that we're not going to hear this effect happen at all until bar 13. At which point I'm going to create another region, and I think maybe it would be fun to have this, rather than it being a fixed volume, maybe what we could do would be to take this on a little bit of a journey. So maybe it starts a little bit lower and it builds and it drops and then it builds some more. And again, what we've got is this great sort of movement that's happening here. And then what I'm going to do is again have this absolutely snap off at that point. Snap off. That sounds like quite a, you know, I don't know what I mean by that. There we are. Could sound rude in a different context. Okay, I'm going to just then have a ramp right at the end, which is going to reintroduce it for the last 4 bars. And then rather than having that ringing kind of clanging sound, which we had when I recorded it, again, I'm just going to turn the volume off all the way through to the end. So again, what we've got a dynamic effect now, another dynamic effect added. So effectively nothing happening at the beginning. Then we're going to hear it in this kind of drop section. Track will come back in. And then again, from a volume perspective, we're just doing something different that last time round. We call that a hard mute on the end. Now you can make this as sophisticated as you like. One other thing that would be quite interesting to vary would be the amount of ring shifting on this shimmering plate. So in other words, if I really want to get sophisticated, I could come back in here, come to the ring shifter, and I could then come and find the overall dry-wet amount. So effectively, this is setting the balance between how wet the signal is and how dry it is. So in other words, if the signal's dry, we'll hear the reverb, but no ring shifting will be added, or we won't be able to hear it at least. And of course, at 100% wet, we're hearing the full effect of the ring shifter added to the reverb. So we could make that dynamic too. In other words, in this middle section, in addition to just switching this on, we could create some points here which make the ring shifting more extreme and less extreme. So we could back it right down in the middle, or we could start with less at the beginning. That could be quite interesting. Let's have a listen to that. I always like synth parts that move and evolve and change in some way, and there's so many ways that we can do that with automation, but we can also adopt exactly that thinking when it comes to programming effects as well. They don't have to be static. There are so many ways in which we can get things moving, and suddenly this feels like we've taken a part that is just an Apple loop, but we've made it kind of more our own because we've kind of created some spaces around it. And there are loads of ways that you could apply this kind of approach. I nearly said logic. This kind of logical approach to other effects within your mixes as well. So whenever you're thinking about working with sounds and thinking, how can I introduce movement? Apply that to effects as much as you do the parts themselves.